Man, it just keeps going and going and going. I personally don't think what we're going to talk about today is going to have an ending until quite possibly Jesus returns. Right? Even though the culture, as you heard in my last video, was sort of making a ploy for a level of personal interaction between each other that is supposed to be more affirming and accepting. That's not the culture that we live in, right? So, in the last 2 or 3 days, many of us have been inundated with stories of an LGBTQ, it's actually called Club Q, if I'm not mistaken, in Colorado, a mass suicide or mass shooting. All right. This has been, depending on whose reports you look at, this is the 600th of the year. But I read another place that said it's the 40th. So those are pretty broad numbers. But essentially, they call a mass shooting anyone who was 4 or more people that were killed in an event, not including the actual shooter. So they call this. So within the last 2 or 3 days, all of us have seen in some way, shape, or form a story of a man who we now know is 22-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich goes into a Colorado nightclub, gay nightclub, LGBTQ nightclub called Club Q, and within seconds opens fire with a rifle, killing 5 people. All right. I heard that story first, that portion of the story first, and then I started to Google it, and I noticed a similar theme in, at least initially, all of the articles I read. And this was from, I use an app called Ground News, and Ground News lets you decipher whether it's news from the left point of view, right point of view, if it's center, how factual. So I use that one. And so I read multiple articles from both the political left and the political right to get a sense. And I noticed a theme in every one of the articles that I just read. So I'm going to read you an excerpt of an article from the Washington Post. And then I want to explain to you something that Dave Chappelle said in his Saturday Night Live opening monologue just 2 weeks ago. And we're going to make a quick connection here, all right? So this is what the Washington Post article, here's how it's reporting the story. Here's the headline. LGBTQ club shooting suspects' troubled past was obscured by a name change, records show. And here's the underlining, the tagline underneath. After suffering online bullying as a boy, Anderson Lee Aldrich altered his identity, documents confirm. And the article goes on to say this. Years before he allegedly walked into a Colorado LGBTQ bar with an assault-style rifle, the man known as Anderson Lee Aldrich had a different name and a tumultuous past. Until age 15, he was known as Nicholas Brink, living in San Antonio, public record show. His parents separated when he was a toddler, and when he was 12, his mother, Laura Vopel, was arrested for suspected arson, according to court documents. She was later found guilty of a lesser offense in connection with the same incident. At age 15, he became the target of particularly vicious bout of online bullying in which insults, accusations were posted to a website along with his name, photos, and online aliases, according to a review of the site by the Washington Post. At some point, a YouTube account was created under his name featuring a crude, profanity-laden animation under the title, Asian Homosexual Gets Molested. All right? So let's just make sure we understand what's happening. So in 7 years ago, which would make it, 2015, this 15-year-old boy's name was Nicholas Brink, and he was a subject of considerable online bullying, right? And they're giving you some backdrop of that. He had his parents split when he was young, and his mom was arrested when he was 12, which would have been, 10 years ago. All right, and so the article continues. I'm only going to read just about 2 more paragraphs. It says this. For unstated reasons, just before his 16th birthday, the young man petitioned a Texas court with 2 of his grandparents' names on the document to legally change his entire name. His mother's name did not appear on the petition. Nicholas F. Brink became Anderson Lee Aldrich, who at 22 would gain infamy as the suspected shooter accused of killing at least 5 people and wounding 18 others inside the Colorado Springs bar known as Club Q. The reasons behind the choice of the new name were unclear. Whether the events of Aldrich's childhood had any bearing on Saturday's horrific violence is unknown, but Aldrich's earlier existence as Nicholas Brink, reported for the first time, offers possible answers to several key mysteries surrounding the suspected gunman. All right, so every article I've read, Washington Post was probably the most detailed, but every single article was trying to give background story. He had this troubled past and this troubled past and so forth and so forth and so forth. All right. What does this have to do with Dave Chappelle? What does this have to do with Dave Chappelle? All right. 2 weeks ago, Dave Chappelle gave one of the funniest Saturday Night Live monologues I've ever seen. In fact, it was probably the best I've ever seen. And I'm old enough to remember like when Eddie Murphy was on and Chris Rock, and it was funny. I don't care what you believe in, what your political side was. That joint was funny. And I mean, in 15 minutes, that was probably better than most specials I've seen or know of comedians having an hour Netflix special. But on this particular monologue, towards the very end, Dave Chappelle said something that is very, very relevant to what I think is happening right now and to the culture, all right? At the very end, Dave Chappelle had been talking about Donald Trump and been saying how a lot of people think his reign is over, but Dave Chappelle lives in where poor white people live. And he was describing in a very comedic way why they still believe in Donald Trump. But towards the end of the monologue, Dave Chappelle was describing what he called the new whites. And he made this statement, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but pretty much verbatim. I'm not going to say it the way he did because he was in comedic form, but he essentially said this. He said, these new whites, man, they just catching up to what black people have been saying all this time. He said, then he kind of did like imitating them. Man, we can't feed our families. He said, black people been on that, right? He said, man, we can't trust the government. He said, black people been on that. And then he ended with, man, we need to get rid of the FBI. And he said, word to MLK, black people been on that. And then everyone erupted in laughter, right? Because they got it. They understood. And what Dave Chappelle was basically saying, in a very comedic, but I think truthful way, is that now, particularly aimed at white conservatives, there is the pushback of, man, the government's, we don't, the inflation is high. We can't feed our families. We can't trust this government. We can't even trust the FBI. And he's saying these are narratives that black people have been saying for the longest time, right? These are the narratives that he's been saying. And he's making fun of the fact that white people are now just seeing what black people are saying. All right. I'm not Dave Chappelle, but I want to add one thing to that which connects to this Colorado shooting, or the explanation at least. One other thing that Dave Chappelle didn't say that I'm going to add to that list is, why do people always make excuses for the crimes of people, particularly when they're white, instead of just calling it what it is? But when they're black, it's where are the fathers? Look at the black community. It's rap music. It's violence. It's the absence of fatherhood. But when it comes to these situations, it's look at the tragic past that he had. He was bullied online. He was this and that. While those things are true and they can shape how you are, and I know we live in a different time. I grew up in a tougher time. This has become the United Sissies of America in many ways. Not in all ways, but in some ways. I got made fun of and made fun of a ton of people. We weren't online, but the bullying was just rite of passage in the way I grew up. But I don't remember anyone from my neighborhood going into some place without any established reason and just shooting the place up, right? So one of the things that what Dave Chappelle's getting at, and he didn't say this, but I'm going to extrapolate on what he said. One of the things he's getting at is that within the black community, this is one of the reasons why the term, the sentiment Black Lives Matter affected so many people, particularly black people. Not the organization. The organization in many ways was trash, right? But the sentiment, the reason why it mattered was because these are the discrepancies that we see. When it's someone who's white, like the guy who went up in Las Vegas and was picking off a bunch of people, they wanted to find out about his tragic past and what may have got him to that point. When the person is black, it's the black community, fatherlessness in the home. Where are all this rap community? It's all these different things. So why can't you just say, this is an evil dude who walked into a place and he murdered people in cold blood? Why does his back being bullied have anything to do with that? And here's the deeper point that I want to make today. Here's the deeper point. The problem is not ultimately gun laws, right? You can say, hey, they need to change gun laws and make people not be able to get these guns. And there's a little bit of a history. He had some he should have been arrested and maybe diagnosed as a wild dude a year ago. There's some stuff that's credible, right? But here's the reality, and here's the problem. We can say, oh, it's gun law, change the gun laws and do this and do that. Here's the problem. The real issue is not just who can get a hold of a gun. Here's what happens in culture, particularly if you're these kind of people, like these white males. Black people usually do not get this kind of benefit of the doubt. It doesn't matter what we've been through, what cultures we've been through, the neighborhoods we grew up in. Those are all used against us when the evaluation comes out. But let me tell you what happens in these situations. If you keep saying about these kinds of people, right, who go into these communities, grocery stores, wherever it is, and they kill people, and then when you talk about them, you kind of almost give them like a justification almost. Well, he had a tough childhood, and he had this, and he had that. You essentially take away the sting of the evil that this is, and you give people, without maybe even trying to, you give us almost sort of a, we feel bad for him if he hadn't got bullied. And it's like, listen, this is an evil world we live in, fam. You're going to get bullied. You're going to get stuff's going to happen. You're going to get jumped. You're going to have to fend for yourself. But that doesn't give any license to going in and killing people. And when you write articles where you're trying to humanize the person, it almost, and don't get me wrong, these people are made in God's image. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if I'm a guy who's struggling with being teased at school, I'm a 16-year-old white kid in the Midwest. I see this happen, and I read all these articles, and they're all talking about, man, he had a rough childhood. He had this and that. He was misunderstood. He was bullied. If I read that, then that kind of makes me feel like, wow, maybe they'll think of me that way if I do this too. The consequences are lost. Calling it what it is lost when you're seeking to try to understand the life of the person. And so if I'm a kid watching that, that's going to encourage me to be like, man, I get more love after I do something evil and wicked as killing people. I'm like, I'm getting more sentiment and more sympathy for doing that than I would by not doing anything at all. So I think when we're focusing on issues like this and we're talking about change gun laws and all that, vote your conscience. But I would say change the narrative. Stop giving these types of stories a background of all the possibilities it may have influenced what they did. There's some use for that from a psychological perspective, but call it what it is. It's evil. And denounce it. And it's evil. Don't write all these articles, because you do two things when you do that. One, I think you give people a reason to do this because they're going to get 15 minutes of fame and they're going to be accepted as, oh, this poor kid. But then two, you show the racial favoritism that people have been talking about for a long time. You do not hear these stories when they're black or Latino. All you hear about is, where are the dads? Where is his dad? Where are the dads of the white dudes who do this? Where are all that stuff? We just see it. It's hypocritical. And this is why Black Lives Matter, whether you like the whether you think they're Marxists or not. I've said this before. No one was marching with Karl Marx signs. They were marching because they understood that this distinction, these discrepancies, gotta stop, fam. If it's evil when black people do it, it's evil when white people do it. if you're not going to, if you're going to talk about the history that this young man went through and maybe help you understand why he did it, then do the same thing when a young dude is black and think about without his dad and the influence and the bullying that he received. Don't make it seem like when it's this side, it's just pure evil and we're the dads, and when it's this side, it's we need to understand what he's gone through. It's hypocritical. No, it's this. Let's be. If you're a Christian, be biblical. It's just evil. It's evil. It's evil. I've been through a lot in my life. I ain't have a dad either. None of that stuff. I've never walked into a place and shot the place up because I got bullied when I was a kid. Now, I'm not the standard by any means. But many of you watching this right now can say the same thing. You've been bullied. You've been made fun of. You've been embarrassed. You've had a bunch of things happen to you and you haven't done that. While I'm saying we want to give people grace and understanding, I think this kind of grace and this kind of understanding, for us, for me, I think it cultivates more of this. Because if I'm a kid getting bullied and this guy crosses the line in ways that I've only dreamed about, and he's essentially being like, oh my gosh, look at what he's been through. This happened and his mom did this and his dad did this. Man, you get more love after you kill someone than you get by taking what people are giving you. What do I know though? This is just a thought. This is just a thought to consider as I watch all this stuff. There is. Oh, man. I tell you what. We justify the sins of the people that we like or that we favor. So I don't want to hear no crap about leftist media. Nah, leftist media would have said black people this, and this, and they don't always give you the details. They talk about fatherlessness and the conservatives. I want to see Candace Owens and whoever else make a video about the fatherlessness of the white community as well. Do that what about the dude in Buffalo who shot up that grocery store? Right? All whatever this is. This guy, I think he's Asian, I think is what. There's so much drama. It's just, you see these racial, favoritistic realities, and then you call people woke or for bringing them up. It's like, nah, fam. People aren't stupid anymore. There's too much exposure to what's happening, and we get it. We just ain't going for it no more. And as believers, we need to be blind in terms of, and call things what they are. Blindly truthful. This is evil, fam. I don't care if they were LGBTQ. They did not. These people are made in the image of God. That was brutally evil. And that dude needs to get the death penalty. Not sympathy because he got bullied 7 years ago at 15 years old. Come on, fam. Nah. All right. Tonight, me and Strack will be back with, we got a crazy episode. We going in tonight. So cross-examiners, be ready. We are streaming live tonight, the Thanksgiving edition, and we going in tonight. We got a lot to talk about, man. Oh, man. We got a lot to talk about. All right. So check us out. Like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button. Leave a comment, all that. Even if you disagree with me, cool. I'll probably disagree with you on some things. I'm just not going to be offended at you and take it personal. So you should do the same, right? All right, y'all. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Go to KirkKennedy.com. And don't forget to get that Serial Killer Still Smiling mixtape. And I appreciate y'all watching. Share, care, and love. Grace and peace, y'all. See y'all in a couple.